Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. Today I will be continuing with part 3 of how to win friends and influence people. Part 3 is a lesson on how to win people to your way of thinking. The first step in winning people to your way of thinking is by realizing you can't win an argument. Dale Carnegie explains this by using several examples of arguments where he knew he was right, but even knowing and proving he was right only made the other person feel inferior, which hurt their pride. A quote to live by according to Carnegie is, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." This stays true in many arguments we find ourselves in. When the other person is wrong but thinks they are right, they will do everything in their power to stand their ground and prove that they are right. If you agree with an individual and say that they are right even if you know that they are wrong, it will not make them feel stupid or inferior to you, but gain their goodwill. This is because everyone loves to hear that they are right. To keep an upcoming disagreement from becoming an argument, there are several steps you can follow. First, welcome the disagreement. If there is something you haven't thought about, then maybe it will come up before you respond and look foolish. 2. Your instinctive impression. Watch how you respond to the disagreement. Make sure your first reaction is not you at your worst or most angry. 3. Control your temper. You can measure the size of a person and their intelligence by what or how easily they get angry. 4. Listen first, do not resist, defend, or debate. This only raises tension and makes larger barriers of misunderstanding. 5. Look for areas of agreement. After you listen to the other person's point of view, find areas where you are on the same page. 6. Be honest. Look for areas of error or misunderstanding and apologize so that it disarms your opponent. 7. Promise to think over your opponent's ideas and study them carefully. Your opponent may be right. It is easier to think over your points and consider your opponents rather than jump to conclusions and look like a fool later. 7. Thank your opponent for their interest. Your opponents may become your friends later because they are obviously interested in the same things you are if they are willing to argue about it. 8. Postpone action to give both sides time to think through the problem. Suggest that the meeting be held at a different time when all the facts that have risen are addressed in better consideration. This will allow you to ask yourself some hard questions, and you may see the disagreement better from the other person's point of view. Principle 2. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, "You're wrong." Carnegie explains that we should never say that someone is wrong. He says there is a positive magic in phrases such as, "I may be wrong," "I frequently am," or even "let's examine the facts." Carnegie finds that admitting you are wrong is very bold, and you will gain an individual's respect by simply stating that you are wrong. This in turn disarms the person whom you may be talking to or about and avoids an argument. One example Carnegie says can be found in Benjamin Franklin's autobiography is that Ben Franklin realized every time he spoke to others, he was impossible to get along with. His opinions would clash with anyone's that differed even slightly with his. These opinions got so defensive that nobody wanted to hear anything from Ben Franklin. Ben lost his friends and people perceived him as a man that knew it all and needed no one else's opinions or ideas. Ben found out that he actually knew very little, and it was not until he was able to find a very different vocabulary when responding to others that people began to like him and take the time to listen to his points. Even though he was not the smartest individual, people began to look up to him and respect him, for he was always willing to listen and try and understand others' opinions before rebuking them. This shows us that the only way to gain people's following and get them to listen to you is by first never saying you're wrong, but by being open to suggestions and taking their ideas into the utmost consideration. Principle 3. If you're wrong, admit it quickly and empathetically. Carnegie wants us to understand that many times we know we are wrong, but so many people have a hard time admitting they are actually at fault. In many situations, if we know we are wrong and if we just admit it, then we can avoid conflict with others. Carnegie talks about an example of him and his dog walking through a forest park where a police officer warns him of next time having his dog wear a muzzle because it could bite a child or kill a squirrel. If he catches him again, he will leave the consequences up to the judge. The police officer catches Carnegie and his dog again without a muzzle, but this time Carnegie tells the officer exactly how foolish he is before the officer can tell him himself. The officer is then more forgiving and lets him off without any trouble. Carnegie states that if we know we are going to be rebuked anyhow, isn't it much easier to hear ourselves criticize what we have done wrong than listen to what the other person has to say about it? If we are able to beat the other individual into saying all the negative things they were going to say about us anyway, the chances are very high that the individual will respond in a much more forgiving tone, and your mistakes will hopefully be minimized. Principle 4. Begin in a friendly way. Carnegie leads us to realize that a hostile attitude will get you nowhere. Everyone must realize that no one wants to actually change their mind. We must be led to change our minds, but to be led to change our minds, one must be very friendly. Many business executives and leaders may find themselves in very sticky situations, whether it be individuals on strike or angered employees. The best way to deal with these individuals is by coming off in a friendly manner. This will grab their attention and allow you to persuade them into understanding. If you can make people feel like you are coming at them in a friendly manner and gently ease them into your point of view, you can lead individuals into a different way of thinking. Compliments and friendliness go a long way. Principle 5. Get the other person saying yes, yes immediately. When talking to others, get them to continually say yes in agreement with what you are saying. Focus on what you agree on and get the other individual to understand that you are both trying to get to the same purpose, only through a different method. Once an individual says no, the person that is talking feels that they must stick with the same idea they started with. Getting a no and disagreement may only cause an argument to start. This is why you must keep the individual on the same affirmative path as you when stating your opinions or ideas about something. Once you get an individual headed down an affirmative yes path in your conversation, it is hard to change that affirmative yes unless something in the conversation takes a drastic turn. If you get a no response immediately, it is almost impossible to make that individual follow along with what you are saying. They automatically build a defense to the conversation, which could cause conflict. A good speaker leads the conversation, keeping the other individual following along and agreeing not because of the method but because of the purpose. Principle 6. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. For some of us, we find ourselves talking most of the time and not listening to what others have to say. When we are trying to win others into our way of thinking, we usually think the best way to do this is by informing others of all the reasons why they should also believe this way. Sometimes this may work, but many times we need to step back and let other people talk out their own ideas. When we listen to others talk out their ideas, we should follow with lots of questions and let them explain their situation or idea in more detail. If you disagree with something that they are telling you, you may have the urge to say something, but you should bite your tongue because this will lead them to not pay attention to anything you have to say. Listening to what others have to say can allow them to get rid of their own negative thought and could even allow them to sell themselves on your ideas if you pry with the right questions. People love to hear themselves talk about their own accomplishments and ideas. It makes them feel good. So always let others talk as much as they can so you can understand where they are coming from. Then you can infer what they may be thinking and how it relates to what you may be thinking before you actually say anything at all. Principle 7. Getting cooperation by letting the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. Many of us think that other people's ideas are stupid or that we want nothing to do with them. When we come up with a good idea, it feels good, and we really put in hard work to make sure that our idea follows through and looks good. If this is true, then wouldn't letting others draw conclusions be the best way to get them to buy in? You can offer suggestions to help lead them in the direction you want, but if you let them decide the rest, they will think very highly of themselves and feel like it was all their idea. No one likes to feel like they are being sold something or told to do something. An example Carnegie talks about is a manufacturer trying to sell new X-ray equipment to a hospital. While the hospital had many other companies trying to tell them why they should buy their equipment, this certain manufacturer tried a different approach of writing a letter stating that they had a new line of equipment that was not perfect but could use an expert like the doctor from the hospital to take a look and give his opinions. After getting the doctor to cancel a dinner just to come look at the equipment, it wasn't long and all of the X-ray devices were installed. This shows you that by getting the doctor to come and look at the machines and give his input on the changes that could or should be done, got him to buy in and make him feel like he helped those machines take off and work well for the hospital he was working for. Principle 8. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Always remember that many people can be wrong, but do not point that out to them. Anyone can prove someone wrong, but it takes a truly intelligent and wise person to let the person continue to be wrong. You have to try and understand those people and understand why they may think they are right. If you can understand why that person thinks the way they do, it could be the door to what motivates their actions. Being able to put yourself in their shoes will save you time and irritation. When understanding how a person thinks, you must understand the reasons that you think what you do. Take a minute and realize that everyone else in the world thinks that they are right just like you do. This will allow you to relate better to others and create better human interaction from here on out. Principle 9. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. 3 out of 4 people you will meet in your life crave sympathy. They do not want to hear blame, but they want to hear agreeance and sincere agreeance at that. You grew up how you are because of your environment or who raised you. We have to be able to understand why a person feels the way they do. You can't blame a person for being short because their parents are both short. Our environment and genetics make us who we are. All we can do is feel sympathetic for someone who has dealt a bad card in life. For many of us, when we have a surgery or break a leg, we show others the surgery pictures in hopes of getting sympathy and attention in return. So if you want others to really like you, you have to show interest in their ideas and desires and show sympathy towards them, or they will no longer want anything to do with you. Principle 10. Appeal to the nobler motives. Almost everyone that does something has two reasons for doing it. The first reason is the real reason for doing it, but the second reason is what they tell others. It's the one that may not be the total truth, but yet sounds good to everyone that hears it. In order to change people, you need to appeal to their nobler motives. Everyone wants to hear a motive or idea that sounds good to them. If we can relate a motive to an individual where you and that individual win in a situation, then they will feel confident they made the right choice. For example, if you were in a group project in college and one person was not pulling their weight, you could simply talk to them and say something like, "We have not finished the PowerPoint presentation, but I hear you do some very impressive work when making presentations." The individual will love the compliment and more than likely make the presentation because they believe you think they are exquisite presentation makers. Principle 11. Dramatize your ideas. If you want attention, you must provide dramatization and showmanship. When we are trying to get someone's attention, we must find a way to communicate what really grabs the attention of our audience. Carnegie explains an example where Jim Yemens, who sells cash registers, was trying to sell new registers to a local grocer. He explained to the grocer that when using his old cash registers, he was losing money. When he said this, he literally threw pennies on the ground. This created an image by not only using words, but by showing the grocer literally what was happening while he was using his old cash registers. This allowed him to make a sale. Dramatizing any story allows your audience to focus on what you're saying. It grabs their full attention. Individuals like to see products in action, and when they do see something working with their own two eyes, they are more apt to buy or buy into that product. The last principle on how to win people to your way of thinking is Principle 12. Throw down a challenge. To get anyone motivated, you must create an environment that challenges individuals. In the book, Carnegie explains an example where the manager of a steel mill had tried everything to get his workers to produce more. He yelled and threatened his men, but was not successful in getting them to produce more. This was changed when Charles Schwab asked the manager for a piece of chalk. With this chalk, he wrote the number of product they had produced that day on the floor. When night shift came in and realized that this was how much first shift had produced, they took it as a competition, and both night shift and day shift started trying their best to outproduce each other. This friendly competition allowed the steel mill to be one of the top producers in the industry. The moral of the story is that everyone loves to compete. When we feel like we are winning or better than someone else, it makes us feel good. If the work you do is exciting and challenging, you will work harder to try and achieve or overcome it. This drives us to work hard and look forward to doing it. I hope that you can take some of what Dale Carnegie has to say into consideration the next time you are faced with one of these situations. Thank you guys for listening and have a good day.